So this is the new Ford Ranger PHEV. I've got it on test for the next 10 days. I'm going to be doing a tow test, an off-road test, and give you some general impressions of living with the car day to day over the next week and a bit. So here's some of the things I've learned following 10 days with a PHEV Ranger. First thing is that the PHEV actually drives better than the V6. It might have the same power to weight ratio as I've described before, but the petrol motor's got a smoothness, and also that electric motor really helps you sort of instantly get off the line. There's not much extra once you're at speed, but certainly off the line it's a nice drive. The electric vehicle experience is just generally useful. Even when you're shuffling trailers, you're waiting for someone to come out of the shops, and you want to pre-warm the car before you get in it, you find all sorts of ways your life can be better with an electrified vehicle. Now, as far as range is concerned, I know people have got beyond 50 kilometres on it. I haven't. I think that figuring on around 30 kilometres for an unmodified vehicle is probably pretty fair for that. Power Onboard, having that at the back is just great, and that's different from having an electrified vehicle. The ability just to plug stuff in, whether it be a caravan or just charging something as you go, or your fridge, you don't need to do a dual battery system, that's just great as well. And I think the more that you use that, the more chances you're going to find to make it useful in your life. And off-roading in EV mode, I've got a separate video on that. That's really great. It's just so much better and safer, I think, just to cruise along in electric mode, not on petrol mode. And AC charging, however, it is slow, but public chargers these days, a lot of them are DC, so the Ranger can't actually use them. They've got to be AC only, which does limit you a fair bit. So for that reason alone, I wish Ford had done DC charging. Now let's look at fuel consumption. I do have a standard fuel consumption loop, and I ran several vehicles across it already. So a bi-turbo 2-litre diesel Ranger XLT, that did it with 7.1 litres to the 100, and this was 58, a whole mix of conditions. My V6 Ranger diesel, when I first got it, was 7.6. The PHEV Ranger in auto EV at 100% state of charge, or very close to it, was 1.7. So this is when I left it in auto, not in EV only, and I said make up your own mind as to what you want to do, and it did it in 1.7 litres to the 100. Then I did it in battery down at 0% state of charge. Now, as I've covered in a previous video, that doesn't mean to say that there's no charge left in the battery, not at all, but it does mean that the engine doesn't really have any extra battery capacity to work with. It has to do a bit of work charging it up, and you can see it went to 7.2, so actually slightly worse than the bi-turbo diesel. Then I went into hold charge, and I expect that to be pretty much the same as 0% charge, because in effect 0% charge is kind of holding it at 0%, but it's not really 0%, it's probably about 20% of battery left. 7.2, 7.4, I suspect if I did it several times that would probably be the same as well. Then finally I said, okay, I'm at 5% or something like that, charge the battery. So direct engine power to charging the battery, and 10.7, the greatest consumption ever. But that is because the engine is being used to charge up the battery as opposed to just power the vehicle. So some other consumption figures here. In my off-road video I talked about taking a V6 out of the PHEV. On the bitumen run, the V6 on all terrains admittedly did 8.5 to the 100, PHEV slightly worse, 8.8, but that was holding charge for EV later at 90%. When we got to the off-road section, we did 25 k's to the 100 is what the consumption was for the V6. The PHEV was 0 for at least part of the off-road section anyway. Combined a 204 kilometre trip, 9.8 versus 10.6, but that did include some charging on the way back. So essentially the conclusion there is that you can save fuel going off-road compared to a diesel, provided it's the shortest trip and you charge at least once when you start, and preferably at one point, some point in the day as well. Otherwise you're going to be better off with a diesel for economy. Now I also did a 156 kilometre suburban drive, 70, 80, 50 and so forth, and I started with a full battery. I didn't get a chance to go to charge it during that drive, about 15 stops, etc. and 7 litres to the 100 is what I got, which is pretty good for 156 kilometres in a vehicle of that nature, and no diesel could have matched that. But that's kind of the sweet spot for a PHEV, particularly when you're starting with that 100% battery. And it would have been better had I been able to charge it at some point during my sort of day of suburban driving. And remember, the effective battery, whilst pure EV mode only might take you 30, 40 Ks, 50 Ks, whatever else. If you use it in auto mode, the effect of the battery lasts a lot longer than that, because it will start to use battery where it makes sense and petrol where it doesn't. So when you accelerate hard, it will put the petrol on, you go into cruise, it will put the electric on, etc. Just let the car do its own thing if you're going to do a lot of suburban type driving. Now, charging, that's a screenshot from Ford's Ford Pass app showing the charging history, and what it says is around about 8.5 hours from 0 to 100%. It's a bit longer than what Ford claimed. That's off 10 amp, it will go quicker, or 15 amp. You can only get to 100% when you're plugged into AC. If you charge it off the engine, you'll only ever get to 90%, and it drew 14 kilowatt hours, not the 11.8 which Ford says the usable battery capacity. So that's usable battery capacity versus actual battery capacity. And remember that the car keeps some in reserve for region. That's why it won't go, you can't engine charge it up to 100%. And remember, you can also schedule the charge for low tariff times as well. But if it's going to take 8 hours to do that, your ability to sort of schedule your charging is a little bit limited. Now, towing, I covered this in my other video when I talked about towing a car trailer, but essentially it tows similar to the V6 but better. Power to weight is the same, but again, you've just got that initial electrical surge off the line, which I think is great. The fuel consumption is not massively different. Again, if you can manage to throw a few charges into PHEV, it will beat the diesel. If you don't, it's not going to. Tow haul mode actually keeps the battery at 90%. It won't actually use the battery. So I would actually be towing a lot of the time in normal mode, when you may as well use that battery, or maybe use tow haul and then for the last 100 Ks flick it into normal mode and use it down. And I love EV mode for trailer shuffling and just low speed work as well. You do get all-wheel drive in this vehicle, which is a fantastic thing for anything towing as well. And I got 14.2 litres to the 100, as you see that there, going up to Winton and back, starting off and that's with multiple charges. So again, I think that certainly the 2 litre would beat that towing it, and my V6 could as well if I hadn't already modified it. But throw enough charges in, it's pretty competitive. Now, some tips. The first one is ABC, always be charging to get the best economy. If you want a PHEV to be cost effective for you, you have to be charging it in, starting the day with a full charge and charging it wherever you can, and that's how you drive your fuel consumption down. If it's just going to be a short trip that you can do in pure electric mode and charge it up again, then just use electric mode for that, no problem at all. But if it's going to be a longer trip, like my 156 kilometre trip all the way around the suburbs, just let the car figure it out. It's better to use auto mode and the car will figure it out over the next 150 Ks than to use all your electrical power, get great consumption, i.e. nothing for the first 40, 50 Ks, and then relatively high after that. Electric EV mode, really good for off-road, and you'll just generally find ways to use and appreciate electric power in your life if you're into hobbies, recreation and everything else with Power Onboard in electric mode. So overall, I don't think PHEVs are dead. I think that they have a valid use case. Sometimes a BEV makes sense, sometimes an ICE makes sense, but for some people a PHEV could be just what you need. Maybe you're one of them. So now let's talk about Power Onboard. So there's the battery. Now, Ford say that the battery is 11.8 hours usable, and it is. However, you can only charge it to 90%. So realistically, it's probably 10.6 kilowatt hours usable, which translates to 880 amp hours at 12 volts if you're looking at it from a 12 volt caravan perspective. So in the cabin, we've got a 10 amp outlet, and in the tub, we've got 2 15 amp outlets, and the total combined power can not exceed 6.9 kilowatts or 6,900 watts. Now that's still quite a lot. In a moment I'm going to show you what we put onto it, but you can run all sorts of things like these, which is really handy. Okay, so here's what we did to test it. Alright, so this is going to be a test of Power Onboard. we've got two caravans, one here, one there, and we have connected both via 15 amp cables, or about to connect both, to the Ranger's Power Onboard. So at the moment you can see that our current draw is only 90 watts, as Trevor is filming that. And Alberto, if I can get you to plug in the caravans.
Both plugged in?
Both plugged in, please. Yep. And we're going to start loading things up. Okay, great. What's it looking like now, Trevor? 240, okay. Right, so what's happening now is the Ranger is charging the batteries of those two caravans, so there's a bit of current draw there, but we're really going to amp things up. So what should we do first? Let's put the electric fry pan on. That's just plugged into 240 volt here, so switch that on. Okay, Trevor, what difference has that made? 1470, that's going up. All right, so let's say that we got a heater. Now the heater's outside, but anyway, let's turn the heater on. What's it reading now? That's up a bit. Okay, so let's put a couple of fans on. They're not going to make a huge amount of difference, so we'll pop the fans on as well. And we'll pop a kettle on. What's it reading now after kettle?
5030.
5030. All right. What else can we do? There's a heat gun there. Get the heat gun going. Okay. Now what?
4520.
Okay. And let's 6410. Kettle. Sorry, not toaster even. Now what? What was that?
Maxed out.
It's maxed out. Has it?
900.
Has it come up with an error?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Still going. Okay. Let's put the hairdryer on. Hairdryer. Hairdryer. Yes. You look beautiful. Okay. So we got a hairdryer, a heater, a toaster, the heat gun, an electric fry pan, and both being charged. It's tripped out. Okay, we finally managed to overload it. Okay, it does have limits after all. So all we've got to do now is just shut down that load. So switch off pull out a couple of those things, Alberto, and then just hit reset for me, Trevor. Okay, and we should be back to
90 watts.
90 watts again, yeah. Okay, so it's just reset. We've unplugged it, reduced the load, and we're back into it. Okay, so we're going to use the Ranger PHEV as a power source for a welder. So here's a basic arc welder which is on. There's someone who looks like they know how to weld. So we'll have a look where Trevor is inside videoing. So
Currently at 980.
980. So, all right, I'm going to look away and please start doing your best welding. Right, and what did that get up to, Trevor?
5.2, didn't peak.
5.2, didn't peak. So there you go. You can weld using a Ranger PHEV. Now the Ranger PHEV is a generator in two ways. First of all, you've got that huge battery on board. Secondly, it literally will regenerate the battery at idle like a generator. So that takes around 2 hours. Now I've done that. I've tested it from 0% to the 90%, which is the maximum. Remember, you can't idle your way to 100%. You need to plug it in for that. Around about 2 hours. It will go quicker if you're driving. The car is designed for idling on hours on end. I have checked that with Ford. You can do a remote start. Now a couple of other points here. So So let's say that you are using the Power Onboard and you've got the engine idling. The engine will shut off once the range gets to 80 kilometers. And equally, if you're using the Power Onboard and you get down to 0%, then the engine will automatically start. So there's protections involved as well, and you can look at that through the app. One other point, if you are going to just leave the car idling to charge up the car, then you needed to disable the 30-minute idle timeout, because I went out to the car and thought, okay, what's going on here? Why hasn't it done? Why did it switch itself off? I discovered there's a timeout which you've got to disable. Other than that, it works really, really well. So as an alternative for caravanners, this is a huge selling point, I feel. So conventionally at the moment, you've got to go buy a generator. That's a small one. A good quality one might cost you $2,200 or thereabouts. You might add solar panels, and then extra solar panels might be $1,000 more for that. Maybe 400 amp hours of lithium battery as well. So all of that starts to add up. Or you could just use a Ranger PHEV, which solves all of those problems straight away. Gives you more storage space in the van. It gives you enough power to be able to run aircon as well. You don't need to worry about solar. You can recharge. In effect, all of your power worries go completely away if you've got a Ranger PHEV. And I think that's a very, very powerful argument for the car from a caravanning perspective. Now, should you buy a Ranger PHEV? Well, there's four compromises compared to a diesel. One is payload. The payload is a bit down, and the rear axle limit is a bit down compared to the diesel Rangers. The service body, you can't fit that at the moment. I'm sure that can be done at some point, but right now there's no options. Range is not as good as a diesel once you get away from charging it, and it costs more as well. If you can live with those four, then I think you have a good car. So here's three people who I think could buy a PHEV Ranger. First one, Sam Suburban. Lives in the suburbs, does a lot of sub 50k trips with kids, just going to the shops, coffee shop, whatever the case may be. But on the weekend, wants to get out there and tow and just do some four-wheel driving. Not really into long-range touring four-wheel driving, not going to do the Canning route or the Simpson anytime soon. Perfect car for him. I think that would really, really help. Then Carol Caravan, she just wants to tow her van. She's not really going to be into four-wheel driving. Might do a bit of dirt road, easy station four-wheel drive track, something like that. But she's primarily about working from her caravan, and I think this is what the PHEV will provide her. Reliable power all the time, no worries at all, just plug the thing in and then go. And finally, Tim Trady does a lot of short trips in the week because he's towing his trailer around. Sometimes he can do that pure electric, but even if when he can't do it pure electric, there's enough charge there from his overnight solar panels to be able to really reduce his fuel costs compared to the other cars. He actually finds it really handy to have the generator, because then he can charge his tools between jobs, actually as he's actually travelling along, and then at the weekend he's got a car which he can go further afield if he needs to. So there's more, but I do think that the PHEV definitely has a place in Australian society. So interested to know what your views of this vehicle are and whether you're going to buy one, and if so, why or why not. Thanks for watching.